History's villains had one major problem. They did not write the history books. Their enemies did. So that monster you learned about in school might have been a decent person with really bad PR. Today, we are looking at 33 infamous figures who got absolutely destroyed by propaganda, jealous rivals, or writers who just needed a good bad guy. Some will shock you, some will make you angry, and at least one will make you wonder what else you were lied to about. Let's fix some reputations. 1. Catherine the Great of Russia. You have probably heard the horse story. If you have not, congratulations on your innocence. Do not Google it. That rumor was started by her political enemies after her death, because apparently when you cannot defeat a powerful woman intellectually, you just make up disgusting lies about her personal life. Classic move. The real Catherine was one of the most progressive rulers of the 18th century. She corresponded with Voltaire and other Enlightenment philosophers like they were pen pals. She reformed Russian education, making it accessible to more people. And here is the kicker. She became one of the first world leaders to get vaccinated against smallpox, publicly, to convince her terrified subjects it was safe. She literally rolled up her royal sleeve to save lives. But sure, let's remember her for a made-up scandal involving livestock. 2. Napoleon Bonaparte. The internet loves calling him a short, angry man with a complex named after him. Here is the truth that might disappoint your memes. Napoleon was about 5'7", which was perfectly average, maybe even slightly above average for a Frenchman in the early 1800s. The short myth came from British propaganda and a confusion between French and English inches. Oops. Now, was he a power-hungry conqueror? Absolutely. But he also created the Napoleonic Code, a legal framework so revolutionary that it became the foundation for civil law in nearly half the world. We are talking about legal equality, property rights, separation of church and state. Every time you benefit from a fair contract, you can thank the short guy. His legacy is literally in your legal system right now. 3. Vlad the Impaler, also known as Vlad Dracula. Yes, the guy who inspired the vampire legend. And yes, the Impaler is not a nickname you get for being a nice dude. He impaled thousands of people on stakes and left them as decorations outside his borders. Absolutely horrifying, no debate there. But here is the context most people miss. Vlad was the ruler of Wallachia, a tiny region facing the full might of the Ottoman Empire, one of the largest military forces on Earth at the time. He was massively outgunned, so he used psychological warfare. Those forests of impaled bodies were not just cruelty for cruelty's sake. They were terror tactics designed to make Ottoman soldiers desert before even fighting. It worked. He defended Europe's eastern flank with sheer nightmare fuel. In Romania today, he is a national hero who stood against impossible odds. 4. Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France. Let them eat cake! The most tone-deaf quote in history, spoken by a monarch while her people starved. Except she never said it. That phrase appeared in a book written when Marie was only 10 years old and living in Austria, not even in France yet. It was attributed to a great princess, and people just slapped Marie's name on it later because it fit the narrative. The real Marie Antoinette was a 14-year-old Austrian girl, shipped off to marry a French prince she had never met, in a country that hated Austrians. She was naive, sure. She spent money on fashion, absolutely. But she also donated to charities, adopted orphans, and genuinely tried to help during famines. She became a scapegoat for problems that existed long before she arrived. 5. Captain William Bligh of the HMS Bounty. Every movie about the mutiny on the Bounty shows him as a screaming tyrant who deserved to be thrown off his own ship. Hollywood needed a villain, and Bligh fit the costume. But the real story is way more complicated. Bligh was actually considered unusually humane for his era. He mandated dancing on deck to keep his crew healthy, enforced a strict diet to prevent scurvy, and rarely used the brutal floggings that were standard practice on other ships. When the mutineers abandoned him, they put Bligh and 18 loyal men in a tiny boat with minimal supplies. No maps, no charts. Bligh then navigated that open boat over 3,600 miles across the Pacific to safety. It remains one of the greatest feats of navigation in maritime history. The real villain was Fletcher Christian, who just wanted to go back to Tahiti. 6. Emperor Nero of Rome. The image is iconic. A mad emperor playing his fiddle while Rome burns, laughing at the chaos. Except fiddles would not be invented for another 1,000 years, so that is a problem. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD was a tragedy, but historical evidence suggests Nero was not even in the city when it started. When he heard the news, he rushed back and personally organized relief efforts. He opened his own palaces and gardens to shelter homeless citizens. He used his personal funds to help with rebuilding. So why the bad reputation? Simple. The Roman senators hated him because he was eroding their power and spending money on the common people instead of them. Guess who wrote the history books? Those same senators. Nero was no saint, but fiddling while Rome burned is literally impossible and definitely did not happen. 7. Al Capone, the original Scarface. Let's be clear, Al Capone was a murderer, a racketeer, and a gangster who built a criminal empire on bootlegging, prostitution, and violence. This is not a redemption arc, but history is complicated, and here is the complication. During the Great Depression, when the American government was basically telling unemployed families to figure it out themselves, Capone opened one of the first soup kitchens in Chicago. His kitchens served 3 hot meals a day to thousands of desperate people, no questions asked. He also made sure the milk sold in Chicago had expiration dates printed on it after a family member got sick from spoiled milk, which became an actual public health policy. A monster who fed the hungry when nobody else would. Make of that what you will. The human brain does not handle contradictions well, does it? 8. Macbeth, King of Scotland. Thanks to William Shakespeare, everyone knows Macbeth as a paranoid murderer who killed his way to the throne and then went insane from guilt. Great drama, terrible history. The real Macbeth ruled Scotland for 17 years, from 1040 to 1057, which was an impressively long reign for that era of constant warfare and backstabbing. His kingdom was stable, relatively peaceful, and prosperous. He even made a pilgrimage to Rome, where records say he scattered money like seed to the poor. Not exactly the behavior of a guilt-ridden maniac. Shakespeare wrote his play to flatter King James I, who claimed descent from Banquo, the guy Macbeth supposedly murdered. So Shakespeare turned a decent Scottish king into a theatrical monster. 400 years later, we are still believing the propaganda of a playwright who needed to keep his patron happy. 9. Thomas Midgley Jr., the engineer. Some call the most environmentally destructive individual in human history. He invented 2 things: leaded gasoline, which poisoned generations of children and adults, and chlorofluorocarbons, the refrigerants that tore a hole in the ozone layer. One man, 2 planetary disasters. But here is what nobody mentions. Midgley was solving real, urgent problems of his time. Cars were knocking and destroying engines. He found a solution. Refrigerators were using toxic ammonia that killed people when it leaked. He found a safer alternative. He worked with the best scientific knowledge available and won awards for his innovations. The long-term environmental consequences were completely unknown and unknowable with the technology of the 1920s. Midgley even gave himself lead poisoning during demonstrations, genuinely believing it was safe. He was not evil. He was an engineer who could not predict the future. Neither can you. 10. Antonio Salieri, the man who supposedly murdered Mozart out of jealousy. The movie Amadeus won 8 Oscars for telling this story. It is also almost entirely fictional. In reality, Salieri and Mozart were colleagues who respected each other. They sometimes collaborated. When Mozart premiered one of his operas, Salieri attended and applauded loudly, which Mozart happily wrote about in letters. Salieri was actually far more successful and famous than Mozart during their lifetimes, so jealousy makes no sense. After Mozart died young, probably from illness, Salieri continued teaching music for decades. His students included Beethoven, Schubert, and Liszt. Oh, and he also taught Mozart's own son, for free, out of respect for his late friend. The poisoning rumor started as gossip and became a movie. Salieri's real legacy is training the next generation of musical geniuses. But that does not win Oscars. 11. Blackbeard, the pirate Edward Teach, terror of the Caribbean. The image is unforgettable. A giant man with smoking fuses woven into his massive black beard, making him look like a demon rising from hell. Pirates were ruthless killers, right? Well, here is the strange truth. There is no verified record of Blackbeard ever killing a single captive. Not one. When ships surrendered, he took their cargo and let them go. The whole demonic appearance, the smoke, the multiple pistols, the theatrical roaring, it was all performance art. He was creating a brand so terrifying that ships would surrender without a fight. Why risk your crew in battle when you can just scare merchants into handing over their stuff? It was brilliant marketing backed by zero confirmed homicides. Blackbeard was less a bloodthirsty murderer and more a very aggressive entrepreneur with excellent costume design and a deep understanding of fear-based negotiation. 12. Fritz Haber, the German chemist who developed poison gas weapons used in World War I. Chlorine gas, phosgene, mustard gas, all pioneered by Haber. Thousands of soldiers died choking and blind in the trenches because of his work. His own wife, also a chemist, was so horrified by his enthusiasm for chemical warfare that she killed herself. So how could this man possibly not be that bad? Because Fritz Haber also invented the Haber-Bosch process for synthesizing ammonia from air. This sounds boring until you realize that ammonia makes fertilizer, and that fertilizer is the reason we can grow enough food to feed 8 billion people. Before Haber, the world's population was limited by natural nitrogen sources. After Haber, food production exploded. Historians estimate that roughly half the people alive today exist because of his invention. He killed thousands and saved billions. The math is horrifying, but the math is the math. 13. Richard III, King of England. Shakespeare gave us a hunchbacked monster who murdered his own nephews, the famous princes in the Tower. Tudor propaganda painted him as a deformed villain. But when archaeologists found Richard's actual skeleton in a parking lot in 2012, they discovered the truth. He had scoliosis, a curved spine, but no hunchback. He was actually a capable warrior despite his condition. And his laws? He introduced the concept of bail, so people were not rotting in prison before trial. He created legal aid for those too poor to afford lawyers. He banned restrictions on the printing and sale of books. The Tudors who defeated him needed to justify taking his throne, so they turned him into a theatrical monster. Shakespeare, writing under Tudor rule, obliged. Richard was not a saint, but he was not Shakespeare's cartoon villain either. 14. William Murdoch, first officer of the RMS Titanic. In James Cameron's blockbuster film, Murdoch takes a bribe from a passenger and then shoots an innocent person before killing himself. It is a dramatic scene. It is also probably complete fiction that devastated a real hero's family. The historical William Murdoch spent his final hours loading lifeboats and saving as many lives as possible. Survivors described him working tirelessly until the very end. There is no credible evidence he shot anyone or took bribes. He went down with the ship doing his duty. When the movie came out, Murdoch's hometown in Scotland was outraged. 20th Century Fox eventually sent a representative to apologize to the community and donated money to a memorial fund. Cameron admitted the scene was a dramatic cool device. A man who died saving others was turned into a murderer for entertainment. That should probably bother us more than it does. 15. Lucrezia Borgia, the infamous poisoner of the Italian Renaissance. Her name is synonymous with murder, seduction, and treachery. She allegedly had a hollow ring filled with poison for discreetly killing dinner guests. Sounds terrifying. It is also almost certainly nonsense invented by the Borgia family's many political enemies. The real Lucrezia was a political pawn used by her father, Pope Alexander VI and her brother Cesare in their endless power games. She was married off 3 times for political alliances, starting at age 13. When she finally escaped to Ferrara as a duchess, she became a respected administrator and patron of the arts. She corresponded with intellectuals, supported artists, and ran the duchy competently when her husband was away. The poison ring is a myth. The seductress image was propaganda. Lucrezia Borgia was a survivor of a spectacularly dysfunctional family, not its mastermind. 16. Xerxes I, the Persian emperor from the movie 300. In that film, he is depicted as an 8-foot-tall, heavily pierced, gold-painted god king with a harem of mutants and a voice like a synthesizer. Cool villain design. Absolutely not historical. The real Xerxes was a typical Persian emperor who continued his father Darius's building projects, including work on Persepolis, one of the ancient world's most magnificent cities. The Persian Empire under Xerxes was remarkably tolerant by ancient standards. Conquered peoples could keep their religions, languages, and local customs as long as they paid taxes and provided soldiers. He did invade Greece, yes, but that was standard empire behavior, and the Greeks were not exactly pacifists themselves. Xerxes was not a monster. He was a king, doing king things in an era when all kings did brutal king things. The Greeks just had better storytellers, and Zack Snyder had better special effects. 17. Alfred Nobel, the Swedish inventor of dynamite. When his brother Ludwig died, a French newspaper accidentally published Alfred's obituary instead. The headline read, "The Merchant of Death is Dead," describing how Nobel had made his fortune helping people kill each other more efficiently. Alfred read his own obituary and was horrified by how history would remember him. This existential crisis led him to rewrite his will, leaving his enormous fortune to establish the Nobel Prizes for achievements in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. He literally created the world's most prestigious award for peace because he was terrified of being remembered as a death merchant. Dynamite itself was not inherently evil either. It made mining and construction safer and more efficient, saving countless workers from more dangerous explosives. Nobel's legacy is complicated, but his response to reading his own premature obituary changed the world for the better. 18. Anne Boleyn, second wife of Henry VIII. History remembers her as the seductress who broke up Henry's marriage, the witch with 6 fingers, the adulteress who slept with her own brother. All of this is either propaganda or outright lies. The 6 fingers thing? There is zero contemporary evidence for it. That rumor appeared decades after her death. Anne was actually a highly educated woman who spent years at the French court, spoke multiple languages, and was passionate about religious reform. She promoted English translations of the Bible when that was genuinely dangerous. Henry pursued her for 7 years. She was not the hunter, she was the hunted. When she failed to produce a male heir and Henry wanted someone new, Anne was arrested on fabricated charges of adultery, incest, and treason. The evidence was torture-extracted confessions and obvious lies. She was executed so Henry could marry wife number 3. History was written by those who killed her. 19. Niccolo Machiavelli, whose name literally became an adjective for ruthless scheming. Call someone Machiavellian, and everyone knows you mean sneaky, manipulative, and morally bankrupt. But read The Prince carefully, and something strange emerges. Machiavelli was describing how power actually works, not how it should work. He was a diplomat who watched rulers succeed through cruelty and fail through kindness. He wrote it down. That does not mean he approved. In his other writings, Machiavelli passionately advocated for republics and citizen participation in government. He was a patriot who wanted Florence to be strong and independent. The Prince was essentially a job application, written while he was in exile, trying to get back into politics. He told the powerful what they wanted to hear. Calling him evil for describing reality is like blaming a weather forecaster for the storm. 20. Genghis Khan, founder of the Mongol Empire and possibly the deadliest conqueror in human history. The numbers are genuinely horrifying. An estimated 40 million people died during his conquests, roughly 10% of the world's population at the time. There is no sugarcoating that. But the Mongol Empire he created was not just a murder machine. Genghis Khan established complete religious freedom throughout his territories. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and others lived and worshipped side by side. He created the yam, the first international postal system, allowing communication across continents. He outlawed the kidnapping and selling of women. He eliminated torture as a legal punishment. He promoted people based on merit, not birth. The Pax Mongolica allowed unprecedented trade and cultural exchange across Eurasia. He was a mass murderer who also accidentally invented globalization. History rarely offers simple villains. 21. Tiberius, the second Roman emperor. Ancient historians paint him as a depraved monster who spent his final years on the island of Capri, engaging in unspeakable activities. The stories are genuinely disturbing if you read them. But consider the sources. These accounts were written by Roman aristocrats who hated Tiberius because he did not play their political games. The verifiable facts tell a different story. Tiberius was a genuinely reluctant emperor who never wanted the job. He was an excellent military commander who expanded and secured Rome's borders. He was so careful with public money that he left the treasury overflowing when he died. Yes, he eventually retreated from Rome to Capri, but probably because he was exhausted by decades of political backstabbing rather than to pursue secret vices. The scandalous stories appeared decades after his death, written by people with every reason to smear him. 22. King John of England, the villain of every Robin Hood story ever made. Prince John, the sniveling coward who taxed the poor while his heroic brother Richard the Lionheart was off crusading. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Richard the Lionheart spent less than 6 months of his 10-year reign actually in England. He viewed the country primarily as a source of money for his military adventures. He taxed England ruthlessly to fund crusades and then got himself captured, requiring an enormous ransom that nearly bankrupted the kingdom. John inherited a financial disaster. Yes, he raised taxes. Someone had to pay for Richard's expensive hobbies. And that tyranny everyone hated? It led to Magna Carta, the foundational document of constitutional law that limits government power. John was forced to sign it, sure, but his villainy accidentally created the basis for modern democracy. Richard got statues. John got cartoon villains. History is unfair. 23. Thomas Edison, the man the internet loves to hate. Every comment section about Nikola Tesla eventually turns into Edison bashing. He stole Tesla's ideas. He electrocuted an elephant. He was a patent troll. Some of this is true, some exaggerated, and the elephant thing was actually done by his employees for a film company years after he left. Was Edison a ruthless businessman who crushed competitors? Absolutely. Was he a self-promoting egomaniac? Without question. But he also democratized electricity. Before Edison's system, electric light was a laboratory curiosity. He created the practical infrastructure, the power plants, the distribution networks, the business models that brought electricity into ordinary homes and businesses. He invented the Industrial Research Laboratory, the model that gave us most modern technology. Tesla was a genius. Edison was a genius who also knew how to make genius useful to regular people. Both things can be true simultaneously. 24. Peter III, Emperor of Russia for exactly 186 days before his wife Catherine had him removed and probably murdered. History remembers him as an idiot who played with toy soldiers while his brilliant wife built an empire. But who wrote that history? Catherine herself in her memoirs, which were basically public relations documents justifying her coup. The real Peter III was actually quite productive during his brief reign. He issued 192 decrees in 6 months. He ended the persecution of old believers, granting religious freedom. He abolished the secret chancellery, Russia's feared secret police. He ended an unpopular war with Prussia. He gave nobles the freedom to travel abroad and quit state service. These were genuine reforms. Was he awkward and bad at court politics? Probably. Was he the drooling imbecile Catherine described? Almost certainly not. Winners write history, and Catherine won spectacularly. 25. Aaron Burr, forever remembered as the man who shot Alexander Hamilton. Thanks to a very popular musical, an entire generation now knows Burr as the villain who murdered a founding father. But dueling was legal and common among gentlemen of that era. Hamilton's own son had died in a duel 3 years earlier. Both men showed up voluntarily. Both understood the rules. Hamilton had spent years publicly attacking Burr's reputation and had just helped deny him the governorship of New York. By the standards of 1804, Burr's challenge was entirely reasonable. And who was Burr beyond that duel? He was one of the few founders who genuinely believed in women's education, making sure his daughter received the same education as any son would. He spoke against slavery in the Senate. He proposed extending voting rights. Hamilton became a hero on Broadway. Burr became a historical villain. Both legacies are somewhat exaggerated. 26. Empress Dowager Cixi, the Dragon Lady who supposedly kept China backwards and weak while Western powers carved it up. Western historians for decades portrayed her as a scheming, conservative monster who blocked modernization. Recent Chinese and Western scholarship tells a very different story. Cixi banned foot-binding, the brutal practice that had crippled Chinese women for centuries. She introduced Western-style schools and sent students abroad to study. She built railroads and telegraph lines. She attempted military modernization. Was she a ruthless political operator? Absolutely. She had to be to survive as a woman wielding power in 19th century China. The Dragon Lady stereotype was partly Western racism and partly propaganda from her internal enemies. She ruled during an impossible period when European imperialism, Japanese aggression, and internal rebellion were tearing China apart. That she held things together at all was remarkable. She deserves criticism, but she also deserves accuracy. 27. Cardinal Richelieu, the sinister villain of The Three Musketeers, who schemes against the dashing heroes. Alexandre Dumas needed an antagonist, and the powerful cardinal fit perfectly. In reality, Richelieu was probably the greatest French statesman between Charlemagne and Napoleon. He took a France torn apart by religious civil wars between Catholics and Protestants and unified it into a coherent nation-state. He founded the French Academy, which still standardizes the French language today. He built the French Navy into a major force. He supported artists and writers. He established France as the dominant power in Europe through a combination of diplomacy and strategic warfare. Was he ruthless? Incredibly. You do not unify a country full of rebellious nobles through kindness. But villain is absurd. Richelieu created modern France. The Musketeers were basically just employees who did not like their boss. 28. Maximilien Robespierre, the architect of the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution. Thousands went to the guillotine under his watch. He is history's poster child for revolutionary excess, the man who proves that idealists become monsters when given power. All true. But before he became the terror personified, Robespierre was one of the most progressive voices in Europe. He called for the abolition of slavery in French colonies, which France actually implemented, becoming the first colonial power to do so, 70 years before America's Civil War. He argued against the death penalty, passionately and publicly. He demanded voting rights for all men, regardless of wealth or property. He wanted free public education. Then he got power. Enemies surrounded him, paranoia set in, and he became the monster he once fought against. Robespierre is a tragedy, not just a villain. His story is a warning about what fear and absolute power do to human beings. 29. Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who terrorized Rome by marching elephants over the Alps. Roman historians portrayed him as a savage barbarian, a man who swore eternal hatred of Rome as a child and dedicated his life to destruction. The Romans literally scared their children with stories about Hannibal coming to get them. But step back from Roman propaganda, and a different picture emerges. Hannibal was fighting a defensive war. Rome had already destroyed Carthage once in the First Punic War and imposed crushing terms. Rome was the aggressive, expanding empire. Carthage was the wealthy trading city trying to survive. Hannibal was a military genius who spoke multiple languages, studied Greek philosophy, and treated prisoners humanely by ancient standards. He was not a monster. He was a patriot trying to save his homeland from an enemy that would eventually destroy it completely and salt the earth where it stood. Rome won, so Rome wrote the history. 30. King George III, the tyrant the American colonies rebelled against. The Declaration of Independence lists his crimes. He is a despot, a monster, unfit to rule. American school children learn he was the villain of the Revolution. But George was actually one of Britain's more constitutional monarchs with limited power compared to earlier kings. Many decisions Americans blamed on him were actually made by Parliament. And that madness he suffered? Modern medical analysis suggests he had porphyria, a blood disorder that causes severe abdominal pain and temporary mental disturbance. He was not crazy, he was sick. In his lucid periods, George was a devoted family man who loved farming so much that people called him Farmer George. He supported the arts and sciences, founded the Royal Academy, and donated his personal library to create the foundation of the British Library. He lost America, but he was never the tyrannical monster the Declaration described. 31. Montezuma II, the Aztec emperor who supposedly just surrendered his empire to a few hundred Spanish conquistadors because he thought they were gods. This weak and superstitious narrative has dominated history for 5 centuries. It is also probably wrong. The Cortes as God story comes almost entirely from Spanish sources, written to justify conquest and from accounts recorded decades later. Montezuma was actually a brilliant politician facing an impossible situation. Cortes arrived with unknown weapons, unknown diseases, and allied himself with every group the Aztecs had ever conquered or offended. Montezuma tried diplomacy, gifts, and negotiation because direct military assault was genuinely risky against an enemy he did not understand. When he was finally killed, it was by his own people, frustrated by the impossible situation. Montezuma was not weak. He was trying to navigate a civilization-ending catastrophe with limited information. He failed, but who would have succeeded? 32. Hatshepsut, one of ancient Egypt's few female pharaohs. After her death, someone systematically erased her name and image from monuments, chiseling her face off statues and scratching her cartouche from temple walls. For years, historians assumed her stepson Thutmose III did this immediately after taking power, suggesting she was a hated usurper he wanted erased from history. But recent evidence shows the erasure happened decades later, probably for religious or political reasons we do not fully understand, not personal hatred. And Hatshepsut's actual reign? It was one of the most peaceful and prosperous in Egyptian history. She built extensively, including her famous mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. She expanded trade, sending expeditions to the land of Punt. She was a successful pharaoh by any measure. The attempted erasure failed. We remember her now more than most pharaohs who were never challenged. 33. Lord Byron, the poet who scandalized Regency England so thoroughly that he had to flee the country. His affairs were legendary. His debts were enormous. His behavior was outrageous. Polite society called him mad, bad, and dangerous to know. All accurate, actually. But here is what happened next. Byron took his fame, his fortune, and his restless energy to Greece, which was fighting for independence from the Ottoman Empire. He did not just write supportive poetry from a safe distance. He personally funded and equipped Greek forces. He sailed to Greece to fight. He spent his own money training soldiers, buying weapons, and trying to unite fractious Greek factions. He died there in 1824, of fever, before seeing a single major battle. Greece won independence partly because Byron's involvement drew European attention and support to their cause. For Greeks, he is not a scandalous poet. He is a national hero who gave everything, including his life, for their freedom. 33 reputations reconsidered. 33 villains who deserved better lawyers. Now here is what I want from you. Name one historical hero everyone worships who was actually a complete garbage human. I am talking statues in parks, faces on money, taught to children as role models. Who deserves to be dragged? Drop your answer below, and yes, I am asking you to start fights in my comment section. If this made you question your history teacher, leave a like and subscribe. We have more lies to expose.